Okay, so today in class we did a very similar activity to yesterday, except this time with cellular respiration. So we had our photosynthesis yesterday, going through and creating energy that was stored in glucose. So today with cellular respiration, we're starting in a human cell, and we are going to use these items that are listed up on the screen. So our pipe cleaner is going to represent energy. Then the yellow beads are going to be hydrogen. Pink is oxygen. Purple are carbon. And then the orange are our ATP of energy that are going to be created. Remember, the ATP is actually going to be adenosine triphosphate. And we will put together an ATP from an ADP when we break apart bonds. And this is how our cells in humans are going to use energy. So let's start going through a couple of the steps here. The first step is that we as humans take in oxygen and glucose to the cell. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this and make my oxygen and my glucose molecules. So now I have my different molecules that have gone into my human cell. So we've taken in oxygen, which is O2. Let's see if that'll focus a little bit better. Taken in our O2 oxygen, and then also our glucose, which is C6, so 6 carbons, H12, 12 hydrogens, and then O6, so 6 oxygens. Now, O2 molecules are also, we call it just oxygen, but naturally they appear in pairs like this. So that's going to be the difference you see. So that all goes into step 1. In step 2, what's going to happen is my particles are in the cytoplasm of my cell. Remember, the cytoplasm is just the jelly that holds all of your organelles in place. And the glucose, so our sugar, is going to go through glycolysis. So we're going to actually split apart the carbon molecules from the glucose, and then they're going to split into pyruvate, which are 2 sets of 3 carbons. And then in all that splitting process, we actually create 2 ATP. So I'm going to separate my carbon from my sugar molecule and then split it into 2 pyruvates. And in using up that energy, or breaking apart those bonds, we are able to add 2 ATP, so we're attaching 2 more phosphates to ADP to give us 2 units of energy that our bodies can use. So that was step 2. So for the next step, we aren't actually going to see a visual change. What happens here is the cell decides if we're going to go through anaerobic or aerobic respiration. And that just completely depends on if we have oxygen there. So if we don't have these oxygen molecules, what you're going to see is we will go through either fermentation, which is the process of making things like alcohol, or also creating lactic acid. So when you work out, you actually create micro tears in your muscles. And if you don't have enough protein or your body can't fix all of them quickly enough, the lactic acid goes in and it kind of creates a buffer while your muscles are injured. And so that's happening in your body as well. But if there's oxygen that's present, what you're going to see is we're going to go through aerobic respiration. So in most of our cells, that's what we're going to be creating. So now we move from the cytoplasm of the cell into the matrix or the fluid part of the mitochondria. And we're going to go through what's known as the Krebs cycle, where we take the carbon and oxygen, so our carbons, and then these oxygens, and create carbon dioxide. And in doing that, splitting up more of the bonds and then creating our CO2 molecules, we actually are going to get 2 more ATP of energy. So these guys, going to move right over here. And then I get 2 more beads of energy. I'm Another thing I wanted to mention is kind of the way we can remember the process that everything's going through the different cells. So we get our energy from the sun, and the sun goes into the grana of our plant in the chloroplast. And those are those stacks of pancakes. So you have to remember, you make the pancakes first, and then you put the syrup on top of it. So the syrup is the stroma in our chloroplast. So we go from pancakes to syrup, and then once the syrup's on pancakes, you put it in your mouth. And in your mouth is where you have saliva. So saliva is another fluid like the matrix of our mitochondria. Then for the next step, we're actually going to release the carbon dioxide. So just like a plant kind of breathes out oxygen because it doesn't really need it anymore, we breathe out this carbon dioxide and we just get rid of it. Once we have released the carbon dioxide, then we actually move into the inner membrane. So we have our pancakes and our syrup, we eat them through our mouth with our saliva, and then we go into our stomach. So the inner membrane is like the stomach of the mitochondria. It's the big squiggly on the inside of it. And we go through a process called the electron transport chain. Now, it's more complicated than we're going to get into in this class, but there's a series of reactions that are going to happen based off of what's going on with our electrons and our hydrogen. And in the end, we create 34 more units of energy and we create water. So essentially what this is doing is we are splitting up the rest of our glucose into H2O. And in breaking those bonds, that's where we get the energy to form more ATP. So the end result of our cellular respiration is that we have water as a byproduct and 34 to 38 units of ATP, kind of depending on how efficient the process is within your body. And these, remember, are essentially what keeps us doing everything that we do. Our cells need ATP to be able to create energy to do everything, from the little things like cellular transport all the way up to helping you blink and breathe. So this is an essential process for every single part of our bodies.